पार्टी गारंटी करती है
Elections in the world's biggest democracy are barely a few days away, and chances are you would have stumbled upon this word, the Model Code of Conduct, at least once. Although it's being used around and thrown around quite a lot many times in multiple contexts and almost for every political party. So since there's so much of talk about it but with little or no understanding about what it actually is, we thought we'd do a video on just that and why the Model Code of Conduct actually matters. So simply put, the Model Code of Conduct, or what's usually known as the MCC, lays down minimum standards of behavior issued by the Election Commission of India. This is issued to all political parties, politicians and candidates. It kicks in as soon as the date and schedule for elections is announced. And it continues till the date the election results are announced, and for this year it's going to be May 23rd. So the Election Commission is, let's say, like a watchdog that reins in the unruly bunch of politicians with one single aim: free and fair elections. I'm sure you must have read reports or heard of cases wherein cash was given or liquor bottles were seized. All of those are simple cases of violations of the MCC guidelines, and there are many others. Let's take a look at some of them. First, the general conduct. This is the first no-go zone. Politicians can criticize other candidates, which is based on their policies and programs, including the work record, but they cannot use the caste card and flare communal sentiments to lure voters. And for this very reason, any place of worship cannot be used for election propaganda. And yes, no intimidation and no bribing. Point number 2, whenever parties have to conduct public meetings, they have to inform the local police so that adequate security arrangements can be made before the rallies are actually held. And yes, you may be over-competitive, but you can't create obstructions in meetings and processions organized by other political parties. Point number 3, processions. Very simple. Carrying or burning effigies of the opponents is not allowed. Now the D-Day. Now all party workers at polling booths must wear a badge with the party name and symbol. Now these are workers who are given permissions by the Election Commission itself. Secondly, they can't distribute liquor during in fact 48 hours prior to elections. Thirdly, a political party must not campaign for votes within a distance of 100 meters of the polling booth on election day. Now, you must have heard of political parties talking about schemes and, the various measures that they'll take if they happen to win. But what actually violates the MCC is that parties that are part of the government can't announce any financial grants or lay foundation stones of projects or schemes, and no official visits can be used for election work. And please don't use the public exchequer's money to promote your campaigns. Now this time, besides offline canvassing, the EC has upped its ante to deal with violations online as well, which is why digital platforms like Facebook and WhatsApp have to be extra alert to watch out for unethical poll behavior. And then there is also a C-Vigil app, which is actually for you voters, that allows you to take control and send pictures of any transgressions by any political parties on the app. So those were some of the most important aspects. The main idea is don't mislead. But despite such clear instructions being laid out, recently the Election Commission found out around 100 violations against various political parties that have been registered till date. So there were 10 violations which were reported from the Aam Aadmi Party's table, then 10 again for BJP, 2 from the Congress, 1 from BSP and 74 for other political parties.
Well, so many transgression by senior leaders is despicable. After all, the model code was created by politicians themselves. So can we say that the politicians 30 or 40 years ago were more responsible?
Let's talk about the other important dimension, films. The past few days, you would have seen various debates around whether films that are seen to be promoting a particular ideology come under the purview of being regulated by the Election Commission. The answer is no. Till the time political funding is not involved, people can freely make films or they can create content for OTT platforms, and that will not be banned by the Election Commission.
Every political party is allowed to do its own propaganda.
Right.
Only thing they cannot use a public broadcaster. The only implication is that the expenditure on this has to be accounted for.
Let's look at some of the cases that are currently being spoken about. Now, very recently, the biopic on Prime Minister Modi featuring Vivek Oberoi has become a hot button issue. Most parties allege that it was violative of the code. In fact, just days back, UP CM Yogi Adityanath also referred to the Indian Army as Modi ji ki Sena. And then you must have seen BJP's messages on Air India's boarding passes, which have irked the Election Commission. So violations happening during the election season by political parties is quite common, but the bigger worry is that rarely does the Election Commission resort to punitive action. Why is that so? Is it because the EC doesn't have enough legal teeth?
Model Code of Conduct is a voluntary code of conduct prepared by the political parties themselves. It's a voluntary code of conduct, it's not a law. If it is not a law, there cannot be any punishment. Now, under the Model Code, we cannot impose any fine. We cannot put you in prison because it's not a law. But then what is the utility? Its usefulness is enormous. It has a moral authority and it has immediate impact.
So it's not been unusual for political parties to violate the code of conduct, and it will never be. So next time, if you see people being lured by money or other forms of might, don't just stop there and say, oh, why bother? Instead, go lodge a complaint to the observers appointed by the Election Commission, or simply just post your complaint on the Election Commission C-Vigil app. After all, if not us, who will make our politicians accountable?